The words hung in the air of our pristine, minimalist living room, as sharp and cold as the glass and steel coffee table between us. "I'm leaving you, David," my wife Amelia announced. Her tone was not one of sadness or anger. It was the flat, matter-of-fact tone of a CEO announcing a corporate restructuring. "I've met someone who understands my world, my ambitions. This life, this quiet little life we've built, it's not enough for me anymore." She stood there, perfectly poised in a dress that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, a vision of polished, ruthless ambition. She looked at me, at my simple button-down shirt and worn jeans, and her expression was one of profound, almost pitying dismissal. "My lawyer will send over the papers," she continued. "I'm being more than generous. I'll let you keep the house. I just want what's in my personal accounts, my investments, and my car. I'm packed. A car is waiting for me. You'll never see me again." She expected me to argue, to plead, to break down. She expected the quiet, predictable, and in her eyes, weak man she had been married to for 15 years to crumble. I did none of those things. I simply looked at her, held her gaze for a long moment, and nodded. A single, slow, deliberate nod. "Okay," I said. My calmness seemed to unnerve her more than any emotional outburst would have. It was a data point that didn't fit her calculations. She frowned, a flicker of irritation crossing her perfect features. "Okay? That's all you have to say? You've clearly made your decision," I replied, my voice even. "There doesn't seem to be anything left to discuss. I wish you well." She stared at me for another moment. Then, with a huff of frustration, she turned and walked out of the door, out of the house, out of my life. The sound of the front door clicking shut was the only sound in the sudden vast silence of the room. I did not move. I listened to the sound of her expensive foreign car pulling away from the curb. The silence that remained was not empty. It was clean. In that moment, something inside me didn't break. It reset. A system that had been running with a critical, resource-draining error for years had finally been rebooted. My name is David Aris, 51 years old, and for the last 30 years, I have been a database architect. My job is to design, build, and maintain the vast, complex, and utterly invisible systems that run the modern world. I create order out of chaos. I build fortresses of data. I ensure that every piece of information is where it's supposed to be, that every transaction is secure, and that every query returns a correct and verifiable result. I am a man who believes in a single fundamental truth. Every system, no matter how chaotic it seems on the surface, has an underlying logic and a hidden log file. Amelia had seen me as her boring, predictable husband, the man who went to his quiet office every day to play with computers. She saw me as the stable, reliable utility that funded her increasingly extravagant lifestyle and her social climbing. She had no understanding of what I actually did. She didn't know that I was the chief architect of the core trading and risk management platform for one of the largest investment banks in the world. She didn't know that the quiet little life she so disdained was funded by my ability to design systems that handled trillions of dollars in transactions without ever failing. She saw a simple man. She never bothered to look at the architecture. She thought she was leaving me with the house and her debts. What she didn't know was that for the last 2 years, as I watched her pull away from me, I had been running a quiet, continuous audit of our shared life. I had seen the anomalies, the hidden accounts, the secret credit cards. I had been a silent observer of her own, personal system of deceit. Her declaration that I would never see her again was meant as a final, dramatic curtain drop. She had no idea that her life, her finances, and the very foundation of her new ambitious future were all inextricably linked to a series of digital systems that I had built. Systems that I, and only I, held the master keys to. I walked over to the large window and watched her car disappear down the street. "You'll never see me again," she had said. That part was probably true, but she would be hearing from me. Or rather, she would be hearing from the consequences of the systems I had put in place. The phone rang, jarring me from my thoughts. The caller ID read, Clara. It was Amelia's younger sister. Her voice was frantic, panicked. "David? Oh my God, David, you have to help me. It's Amelia. Something's happened. Something is terribly wrong with her accounts. She's been wiped out. Everything is gone." I took a slow, deep breath. The system was working perfectly. The reboot was complete. Clara's voice was a torrent of panicked information. Amelia called me from the airport. She was trying to transfer money to a new account, and it was gone. All of it. Her private investment portfolio, the one her financial advisor managed? It's empty. Her savings account is frozen. Her credit cards are all being declined. She thinks you did something. She's screaming, David. She says you've stolen everything. I listened patiently, letting her unload her sister's second-hand hysteria. Clara was a good person, a pediatrician who had always been faintly embarrassed by her older sister's social climbing ambitions. She was the only member of Amelia's family I had ever genuinely liked. I haven't stolen anything, Clara, I said calmly, when she finally paused for breath. Every penny of Amelia's money is exactly where she put it. The problem is, she doesn't seem to have a clear understanding of the system she was using. What does that mean? She asked, confused. It means, I said, choosing my words with the precision of a line of code, that her financial world was a bit more complicated than she thought, and she has just run into a firewall she didn't know existed. I ended the call by telling Clara that Amelia's new lawyer should contact my lawyer if she had any questions. I gave her the name and number of a woman named Sarah Chen, a legend in the world of forensic accounting and litigation. I knew the name alone would send a clear, powerful message. The story of that firewall had begun 2 years ago. It had started with a single anomaly, a piece of data that didn't fit the pattern. I was reviewing our joint tax returns, and I noticed a significant capital gain from the sale of some stocks in a brokerage account I didn't recognize. When I asked Amelia about it, she was dismissive. "Oh, that's just my personal portfolio, David," she'd said. "My financial advisor, Julian, manages it for me. It's all very complicated. You wouldn't understand." Julian Croft. He was a slick, charismatic man she had met at a charity gala. He had quickly become her guru, guiding her into a world of exclusive investment opportunities and private funds. A world she had made clear that was far too sophisticated for her boring, tech nerd husband. Her condescension was my first red flag. My entire career was built on understanding the most complex financial systems in the world. The idea that I wouldn't understand a simple brokerage account was laughable. It wasn't a statement of fact, it was an act of concealment. So I did what I do best. I ran a diagnostic. I didn't need to hack into her accounts. As her husband, I had legal access to all of our shared financial information. But more than that, I had built the digital infrastructure of our lives. I had set up our home network, our cloud storage, our password management system. I was the super user of our shared existence. A flashback. Amelia, struggling to set up a new laptop. "David, can you just handle this?" she'd said with an exasperated sigh. "Set it all up for me. I don't have time for this technical nonsense." I had set up her laptop, her phone, her tablet. I had linked them all to a secure shared cloud account that I had built, an account that performed automatic encrypted backups of all her data. It was a system designed for convenience and data protection, a system she had never bothered to understand. It was in those backups that I found the truth. I found the statements for her secret brokerage account. I found the emails between her and Julian, and I found the structure of their plan. It was a classic scam, elegant in its simplicity. Julian was not a brilliant investor. He was a con artist. He was using Amelia's money that came from our joint accounts and the salary I earned, to invest in a series of high-risk speculative ventures and shell companies. The gains she was seeing were a fiction. He was running a small-scale Ponzi scheme, paying out early dividends from the money of new investors he was bringing in, creating the illusion of high returns. The core capital, however, was being siphoned off into his own accounts. But the most damning discovery was the one that implicated Amelia herself. Julian had convinced her to become a partner in his firm. She had signed documents, making her a co-owner of the LLC that was at the center of the scam. She wasn't just a victim. She was a willing, if ignorant, co-conspirator. She was so blinded by the promise of her own financial genius and so dismissive of my own expertise that she had walked, open-eyed, into a trap. This discovery changed everything. My initial hurt and suspicion were replaced by a cold, protective instinct. My life, my reputation, and my financial security were now legally entangled with a criminal enterprise. It was a critical system vulnerability. I had to patch it. I spent the next few months building my firewall. I didn't confront her. I didn't move my money. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I worked with Sarah Chen, my new lawyer, to create a series of legal and digital tripwires. We created an irrevocable trust in my name, with my 2 children from a previous marriage as the beneficiaries. We moved my personal, premarital assets into it. Then came the masterstroke. I knew Amelia's entire financial world, her brokerage account, her private investments, Her communication with Julian was managed through a single proprietary wealth management platform that Julian's company used. It was a standard off-the-shelf system, but they had customized it. It was full of security holes. I spent a weekend analyzing its architecture. It was, to my professional eye, an amateurish mess. I found a critical vulnerability, a backdoor in the system's authentication protocol. It was a flaw so fundamental, it was almost beautiful. I didn't exploit it. I simply wrote a script. A quiet, patient, conditional script. The script was designed to do one thing. Upon the activation of a specific trigger, the filing of a divorce petition with my name on it, the script would execute. It would access Amelia's brokerage account through the system's own flawed security. It would not steal the money. It would simply transfer every liquid asset from her account into a secure third-party escrow account, managed by a court-appointed custodian. The funds would be frozen, pending a full forensic audit to disentangle her investments from the larger criminal enterprise run by Julian Croft. It was a digital quarantine, a perfect legal and completely devastating firewall. Amelia's panicked phone call to her sister was the sound of her hitting that wall at full speed. She thought she was leaving me. She had no idea she was triggering the lockdown of her own corrupted system. The days following Amelia's departure were a masterclass in controlled chaos, all of it happening on her side of the fence. My life, in contrast, became a sea of tranquility. The large modern house, which had always felt like a showroom designed to impress her friends, began to feel like a home. The silence was no longer a sign of a strained marriage. It was a sign of peace. My first priority was to establish a new secure baseline for my own life. I had the locks on the house changed. I systematically went through every room, packing up Amelia's remaining belongings. The clothes, the books, the art she hadn't deemed valuable enough to take into boxes. It was not an emotional process. It was a system purge, removing a corrupted user's files from the network. The boxes were moved to a secure storage unit, a neutral third-party location, awaiting disposition by the lawyers. I was creating a clean, defensible space. The legal battle began almost immediately. Amelia, presumably after her new partner Julian realized their shared pool of money had been frozen, hired a notoriously aggressive divorce lawyer named Richard Thorne. Thorne was a shark, known for his scorched earth tactics. His first move was a threatening letter to my lawyer, Sarah Chen. He accused me of illegal computer intrusion, theft of marital assets, and a malicious campaign of financial terrorism. He demanded the immediate release of the frozen funds and threatened both civil and criminal action. Sarah Chen's response was a work of art. It was a calm, dispassionate, 2-page letter. In it she explained that the funds had not been stolen but had been legally sequestered by a court-ordered escrow agent, pending an investigation into the financial activities of a certain Mr. Julian Croft and his investment firm. She pointed out that this action was taken to protect the marital estate from further exposure to what appeared to be a significant criminal enterprise. She attached as an exhibit a single document, the incorporation papers for Julian's LLC, which clearly listed Amelia as a managing partner. My client, Mr. Eris, she wrote, discovered his wife's unwitting entanglement in this potentially fraudulent scheme. His actions were not malicious. They were a prudent and necessary step to protect himself, and by extension your client, from catastrophic financial and legal liability. We are not just protecting my client's assets. We are protecting your client from a federal indictment. The letter was a strategic masterpiece. It reframed my actions from those of a vengeful husband to those of a responsible fiduciary. It shifted the focus from our divorce to Amelia's relationship with a criminal, and it presented her with a horrifying new reality. I wasn't her adversary. I was, in a twisted way, her only protection from a far greater threat. Thorne's blustering response was a demand for a 4-way meeting. He wanted a confrontation. He still believed he could intimidate me, that he could poke holes in our story. He was a man who brought a loud voice to a data fight. He was about to learn that data does not flinch. While the lawyers postured, I continued my own quiet work. I knew that the escrow account was only a temporary solution. To permanently sever my financial life from hers, I needed to prove that the money she had given to Julian was not just a bad investment, but was the product of a deliberate long-term deception that had started long before she had met him. I went back to the archives, to the digital log files of our life together. I was looking for a different kind of pattern, not of spending, but of communication. I analyzed years of our shared phone records, email logs, and social media data. I wasn't looking for evidence of the affair. I already had that. I was looking for a pattern of behavior, A narrative of her character. A flashback. A dinner party at our house. 5 years ago. Amelia was telling a story about a recent charity auction she had run. She was exaggerating her role, taking credit for the work of others, subtly inflating the amount of money raised. I remember feeling a vague sense of unease. It wasn't a malicious lie, but it was a lie designed to enhance her own status. It was a system built on flawed data. I started to search for other instances of this. I found dozens. Emails to friends where she had exaggerated my income to seem more impressive. Social media posts where she had presented a small personal gift from me as a wildly extravagant purchase. It was a consistent pattern of small, self-aggrandizing deceptions. She wasn't just lying to me. She was lying to everyone. She was building a brand, a persona, that was based on a foundation of falsehoods. This, I realized, was the key. Her involvement with Julian wasn't an aberration. It was the logical culmination of her character. She was drawn to him not just for romance, but because he was a reflection of her own aspirational dishonesty. He promised a life that was as beautifully extravagantly fake as the one she had been trying to build for herself. I compiled this data into a separate file. It was a psychological profile, told through data. It was a story of a woman who had become so enamored with the facade she had created that she had lost the ability to distinguish it from reality. It was a story I knew Sarah Chen could use, not to shame her, but to demonstrate a long-standing pattern of poor judgment and untrustworthiness to a judge. The fortress I was building wasn't just made of legal documents and financial firewalls. It was made of the truth in all its forms. The quantifiable truth of a bank statement and the qualitative truth of a person's character, as revealed by their own words and actions. Thorne and Amelia were about to walk into a room where both truths would be on full display. The meeting took place in a neutral conference room at a downtown law firm, a sterile, impersonal space that felt like a demilitarized zone. I arrived with Sarah Chen. I was calm. Sarah was, as always, impeccably prepared. Amelia arrived with her lawyer, Thorne, and to my surprise, her new partner, Julian Croft. Bringing him was a tactical error on their part, a display of arrogant defiance that would play directly into our hands. He was there to project an image of a powerful, successful man, the future Amelia had chosen. He had no idea he was walking into his own deposition. Thorne began the meeting with his trademark aggression. "Let's be clear," he said, leaning forward on the table. "Your client, Mr. Maurice, has illegally frozen my client's personal assets. This is a malicious act, and we are prepared to pursue every available legal and criminal remedy if they are not released immediately." Sarah Chen did not respond to his bluster. She simply opened a file and slid a single document across the table. It was a flowchart, a beautiful, elegant, and utterly damning flowchart. "Let's talk about your client's personal assets, Mr. Thorne," she began, her voice cool and precise. "This chart, prepared by my client, a man who is, as you know, an expert in systems architecture, details the flow of funds from his personal salary and a joint marital account into a brokerage account managed by this man, Mr. Croft." She pointed a pen at Julian. "Over the last 2 years, over $1.2 million of marital funds were transferred into Mr. Croft's investment firm. Our analysis shows that these funds were then diverted into a series of high-risk ventures and shell companies, including a significant amount that was used for Mr. Croft's personal expenses." She then slid a second document across the table. It was a summary of Julian's credit report, which we had legally obtained. It showed a mountain of debt, multiple pending lawsuits, and a credit score that was in the Mariana Trench. "Your client's financial advisor is not a successful investor, Mr. Thorne," she continued. "He is a man on the brink of financial ruin. The money he took from your client wasn't invested. It was used to service his own massive debts. He was using her to bail out his own sinking ship." Julian's face went white. He started to protest, but Sarah cut him off. "Mr. Croft, I would advise you to remain silent. We have a full forensic workup of your company's finances. We are aware of the Ponzi-like nature of your dividend payments. The SEC would be very interested in our findings, as would the IRS." Thorne was staring at the documents, his face a mask of disbelief. He had walked into the meeting prepared to fight about a divorce settlement. He was now faced with evidence of a major financial fraud, with his own client sitting at the center of it. This is a misunderstanding," Amelia stammered. "Julian is a brilliant advisor. I am a partner in his firm. We are building a future, You are a partner in a criminal enterprise, Amelia, I said, speaking for the first time. My voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of 2 years of silent observation. You were so eager to believe in your own financial genius, so dismissive of my competence, that you failed to do the most basic due diligence. You signed documents you didn't read. You invested in a man you didn't investigate. You built your future on a foundation of lies, and now it is collapsing. Sarah Chen then delivered the final, devastating blow. Mr. Thorne, she said, we are prepared to drop our investigation into your client's complicity in this fraud. We will not forward our findings to the authorities. My client does not wish to see the mother of his former stepchildren go to prison. Amelia flinched at the phrase former stepchildren. It was a deliberate, precise cut. In exchange, Sarah continued, your client will sign a new divorce agreement. It will stipulate that she has no claim on any assets, real or financial, beyond her own personal belongings. She will walk away from this marriage with what she brought into it, which according to the records, is a 2014 sedan and a degree in art history. She will sign it today. If she does not, this entire file, including the evidence of your client's co-ownership of a fraudulent investment scheme, goes to the U.S. Attorney's Office this afternoon. The room was silent. The choice was stark, brutal, and absolute. A quiet, clean exit with nothing, or a noisy, public, and potentially criminal implosion. Thorne looked at his client. He knew the fight was over. He had no moves left. Amelia was staring at me, her eyes filled with a new, terrifying emotion. It wasn't anger. It was fear. The quiet, boring man she had left behind had just demonstrated with cold, irrefutable logic that he held her entire future in his hands. He had built a system she had never seen, and she had just been informed that she was trapped inside it. The facade of the powerful, ambitious woman finally shattered, and all that was left was a frightened, foolish person who had made a catastrophic miscalculation. The man she had dismissed as irrelevant was the very architect of her ruin. The signing of the new divorce agreement was a quiet, pathetic affair. Amelia's hand trembled as she signed the document, her signature, a shaky, unrecognizable version of its former confident self. Julian Croft sat beside her, silent and defeated, a man whose elaborate con had been dismantled by a quiet database architect. Thorne witnessed the signature with the grim resignation of a lawyer who knew he had been completely and utterly outplayed. They left without another word. The powerful trio that had walked in an hour earlier slunk out of the room like defeated soldiers. The war was over. I had not just won, I had achieved a state of total systemic victory. The aftermath was a quiet unraveling. The escrow account was dissolved. A portion of the funds was used to pay back the other, smaller investors. Julian had conned, a decision I made with Sarah, to mitigate any further legal blowback. The rest of the money that had been siphoned from my own accounts, was returned to my trust. Julian Croft, stripped of his fraudulent enterprise, declared bankruptcy and vanished into obscurity. Amelia, with no money and no powerful partner, was left adrift. Her ambitious new life had been a mirage, and it had evaporated in the harsh light of reality. I heard through Clara that she had moved back to her hometown, living in a small apartment, working a retail job. Her grand ambitions had been reduced to the quiet desperation of a life she had tried so hard to escape. I felt no joy in her downfall. Her fate was simply the logical output of a flawed system. She had made a series of bad decisions based on a foundation of arrogance and deceit. The system had, in the end, simply corrected itself. My life, in contrast, began to be rebuilt on a new foundation. The house, purged of her presence, became my sanctuary. I filled the empty closets and drawers with my own things. I turned one of the spare bedrooms into a library, filled with books on history, architecture, and of course database theory. It was a space that reflected me, not the person Amelia had wanted me to be. I found a surprising peace in the solitude. The constant low-level stress of living with a person who held me in contempt was gone. The quiet of the house was a comfort, not a void. I focused on my work, finding a renewed passion for the elegant logic of a well-designed system. My relationship with Clara, Amelia's sister, was an unexpected gift. With the toxic presence of her sister gone, we were able to build a genuine friendship. She would come over for dinner sometimes, and we would talk for hours. She was a kind, intelligent woman who was carrying her own burdens of a difficult family. You know, she told me one evening, in a way you freed both of us. I spent my whole life being compared to her, being told I wasn't ambitious enough. Not like Amelia, You showed me that her ambition was just a house of cards. A few months after the divorce was finalized, I was working late in my home office. I was designing a new complex data sharing protocol for a client. The work was absorbing, a beautiful puzzle of logic and security. As I was saving the file, I named it. I called it the Clara Protocol. It was a system built on a new set of principles for me. Not just security and efficiency, but on transparency and trust. It was a better system. My phone rang. It was Clara. "David," she said, her voice warm. "I'm at that little Italian place you like. I saved you a seat. Are you done playing with your computers for the night?" I looked around my quiet, orderly office. I looked at the screen, at the elegant lines of the system I was building, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt a sense of profound, uncomplicated peace. "Yes," I said, a smile spreading across my face. "I think I am. I'll be right there." I saved my work, shut down the computer, and walked out of my office, out of my house, and into the beginning of a new, better designed life. The old system had been rebooted. The new system was running perfectly, and it was built to last.